got a license to talk.
Shocking. Positively shocking.
And the words are for your ears only.
I think you got the point.
Welcome to The Words Are Not Enough.
On episode 15 of The Words Are Not Enough, it's a Danny Boyle extravaganza as the man himself explains his involvement in the franchise, and we finally get some updates on the Bond 25 production team. Plus, Anthony Horowitz provides new details for his upcoming 007 adventure, Forever and a Day. All this and more coming right up. Stay tuned.
What is up, everyone, and welcome to The Words Are Not Enough. This is our bi-monthly James Bond talk show. We really have no timetable for this, but I don't know, bi-monthly kind of sounded right. I was going to say bi-weekly, because actually I think this episode is bi-weekly. We actually, didn't wait so long to put out an episode. Maybe it's because we know what we're doing this time. Or maybe... Right, or maybe it's because there's actually some Bond news to talk about. But anyways, before we dive into that, I am one of your hosts, Griffin 008 Schiller, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Brody 005 Saravelli. Wow, that's the first time I fucked up your last name. But anyways, Brody, say hello to everyone. How are you doing on this this terrific Friday?
I've lost track of the days, honestly. I don't even know what day it is, so thank you for reminding me that it's Friday.
Yeah, that was really the only reason I mentioned the days, because I knew that you were lost in the sauce and you needed some reminders.
Also, I was thinking about this last night when I've been rewatching a couple of
Bond films,
80s Bond films, and I kind of wish I'd made mine 004 because I like 4 as a number better. But
you can change, because realistically it means absolutely nothing. We just try to be fun and funny.
I'll wait for 004 to die, and then I'll assume his mantle.
Yeah, right. Well, it was kind of funny because the past couple of days, you've been watching some Bond films, I've been watching some Bond films, and we've been conversing about it, so it's been kind of nice. You've been delving into more of the 80s and up until like 90s kind of Bond films, and then I've been going back and rewatching basically all of the Connery era. So we've been getting both very different doses of Bond, but both pertaining to the Cold War, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, it's been very interesting. I something about like that era speaks to me. I think we're going to speak a bit more about that later on, possibly. No, that's a different topic. We're talking about a different topic.
That's a different topic. But so you can feel free to kind of.
Oh, here we go.
Kind of express your interest. In it now,
I was just this will be the most on-topic, off-topic intro we've ever had.
I think so, because we're actually talking about James Bond, so this is kind of mind-blowing.
It's shocking, positively shocking. But,
oh my God, there we go. The puns are not enough.
But there we go, and we've got our Is Not Enough reference in already.
Dude, we're on top of everything today. We're just ahead of the game. We don't have to wait until the game.
Bi-weekly, man. When it's bi-weekly, we just hit our stride.
I agree.
But I was just like, we talked a bit about this when I was watching them, but the 80s Bond films, I've always had like a real connection to that era. And what I would classify as the 80s is like literally from the beginning of the 80s, so like For Your Eyes Only right up until like I would count GoldenEye as part of the 80s, even though it's 95, but
it still has that feel of like the previous films.
And they all feel the same. And I mean, like, granted, that's because all of them except for GoldenEye are directed by John Glenn, but it's just interesting that because like John Glenn's not a director I would have thought of as having a directorial style, but he definitely has left sort of an impression on the franchise in the way he sort of regards the material, like especially considering like all the late Connery films and the early Roger Moore films all sort of are very over-the-top, gadget-laden, with a lot of emphasis on like sort of the sci-fi elements of the series.
Yeah, and then they're definitely more about the spectacle.
Yeah, I mean, not even like action spectacle. It's more just like sort of like crazy exotic locales and beautiful women and the gadgets and the cars. And then you get to For Your Eyes Only, and even though there's still a lot of that in the like those last few Roger Moore ones especially, but there seems to be more of just like a focus on like Bond sort of being more on his wits, more sort of, I don't know, in his the plots seem to revolve more around like the Cold War and like things going on in the political now of the time.
And I would say the last time that the franchise really did that was From Russia with Love,
Yeah,
which was
absolutely.
way back at the start of it. So it's kind of interesting how it's just like it kind of started out in that realm, but then it like deviated so far away, and then it kind of like came back around to it.
And it's so interesting because like we're seeing this now with the Daniel Craig films, and we will talk about this a little bit later. But
yeah.
There is there's sort of like a harkening back to that 60s sort of aesthetic. And it's really interesting because no one ever harkens back to the 80s aesthetic, which I think is almost, for me personally, is almost more iconic to me, because that's like when I think of Bond, that's what I think of. I think of like that span there, especially because of things like GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies, and not Tomorrow Never Dies, License to Kill and Living Daylights. Those three are some of my favorites, and so that kind of grounded but also like still a little over the top sort of aesthetic is what I think of when I think of Bond. And
it's also like it's kind of like the two major points of the Cold War. Like you have the 60s stuff with Connery, especially from Russia with Love, which is very reminiscent of that time period. It's very relevant to what's going on in the world at that point in time.
It was JFK's favorite book. At least at that year anyway.
Sure, yeah, I believe it. And then you've got the stuff with like the Living Daylights and not so much License to Kill, but like GoldenEye and all that stuff, which very much invoke the feeling of the Cold War. Well, but
License to Kill really taps into that drug war sort of thing going on. So even it,
right.
Yeah.
It's not so much on the nose as like the Living Daylights is per se, but it is like. You're right. It's a different part of the world during that point in time, but still, tying into the larger worldly narrative, I guess you could say.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I think, and I think a similar sort of feel like they tapped into that again with Casino Royale. Casino Royale is very much reminiscent of those films in that and I mean. No surprise because it's Martin Campbell, but it definitely has that sort of that same feeling of like very aware of the world it's taking place in, while still being a James Bond film. So
yeah, absolutely. No, yeah. I agree. No, and I'm glad we started off with this because this is a great conversation that I think we kind of started last night, but then now we kind of were able to finish it. So
yeah, we have an audience this time, so that's nice.
Yeah, right. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. But let's dive into some news here, starting with Tomorrow Never Lies. Now, this is really the main reason we are doing a regular episode, is because we actually have an official announcement from Eon, MGM, and all that jazz. So we've got our official Bond 25 announcement. I'm going to be reading you the press release that they put on their Facebook, their Twitter, all their social media sites. So the statement reads as follows. We've been expecting you. Bond 25, Daniel Craig's fifth outing as 007, will be directed by Academy Award-winning Danny Boyle from an original screenplay by Academy Award nominee John Hodge. Production is set to begin on the 3rd of December 2018. MGM will partner with Universal Pictures to release the film worldwide. Now, that is the actual statement, but it should be noted that the untitled sequel will be released in the UK on October 25th, 2019. You lucky bastards in the UK, you get it. Way before us in the U.S.
I'm going to plan a trip. I'm going to plan a trip for that time of the year.
Honest to God, I think I might have to, because we in the U.S. get it on November 8th, 2019. Ugh. So it pays to be a Bond fan in the UK. Who would have thought? But anyways, while the statement appears fairly straightforward, there are actually some interesting bits that we're going to cover. So first off, the international distribution, which is probably the biggest thing to take notice of here. Sony Pictures has handled the distribution of the last 4 Bond films from Casino Royale to Spectre, and while Eon opted to go with MGM and Annapurna for domestic distribution when the deal expired, many assumed Sony would still be handling international distribution. That is not the case. The switch to Universal is actually kind of a huge blow to Sony, and it's garnered some serious coin had they maintained the international distribution rights. Because Sony has been struggling for such a long time, just, selling off their properties or leasing them. Take a look at Spider-Man and stuff like that, and Bond was really the only property they had that was, going to give them guaranteed money, and now they don't even have that. So that's kind of detrimental to Sony, but whatever, that's their problem. So the next
the
thing,
way they handle, I'll chime in after you finish.
Yeah, sure thing. So the next thing to take note of is the start date. So with all the higher ups at Eon appearing to be 100% on board with the script penned by John Hodge, as we mentioned in previous episodes, they wanted to read the script first before they 100% locked down John Hodge and Danny Boyle for the film. And so it goes without saying that Danny Boyle is now confirmed to direct 25. This will make for an interesting timetable for Boyle, seeing as how he's shooting a smaller scale original musical for working title this summer starring Kate McKinnon, and it sounds like he's going to very quickly complete post-production on that film while simultaneously prepping for Bond 25, which is going to be a massive task for him. Any Bond film is going to be a massive task, but jumping from that small project to something like Bond 25 will not be easy, but we trust in Danny Boyle. So the Bond 25 filming date was likely non-negotiable since Eon had promised that fall 2019 release date. So it'll be very interesting to see how Boyle juggles both productions. So this kind of it should let me back up real quick. It should be noted that this kind of thing isn't entirely out of the norm for Boyle. He previously shot principal photography on 2013's Trance, and then he put that aside for a year so he could direct and ultimately create the London Olympics opening ceremony. And then after that, he completed post-production on Trance. So Boyle does have experience tackling multiple projects at once. So that'll hopefully prep him for this monumental task of switching between a fucking musical and Bond 25. So
and interesting to note that the London opening ceremony was also a Bond thing. So
yes, exactly. A lot of people were pointing to that when Boyle was announced as the front runner for Bond 25. But anyways, you got all that information. Let that digest. Brody, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, it's essentially what we knew was coming. We predicted it. Yeah. And all the signs really pointed towards Boyle and Hodge teaming up to bring us Bond 25. But the interesting bit is the Universal Pictures distributing the international having the international distribution rights, I should say. Sorry, words, very hard. But anyways, Brody, just let me get your thoughts on all this.
Well, first of all, I gotta say, we already called this kind of, and I think most people, keeping their finger on the pulse, kind of knew this is where it was going. But how can you not be excited when you hear, we've been expecting you? That's
it's great.
Oh, my God, that just gets my blood going. It's also really exciting, just when they say Academy Award-winning, that's or Academy Award nominee. All that stuff is really, really cool. And it gets you excited. Really, really happy about this Universal thing. Not that I think Universal is the best distributor.
Well, I think it's definitely a step up from Sony.
Definitely a step up.
And
that's the main takeaway, is that Sony, as much as it's a joke that Sony kind of flounders around and whatever, but they did such a bad job with the Spectre, with the Sony leaks going on around that, and then we saw a bunch of I don't know if did you read any of those Sony leaks?
I didn't. Actually, I think I did a while back, but I don't even remember them. But I remember the whole debacle that it was, and it just. It's really a shame because of some of the properties that they own, but Sony is just, as far as studio goes, they're just a floundering fish, and I wouldn't be surprised if they capsized at just any moment. Yeah, so and they eventually have to sell off everything. So it's a good thing that that Universal now has the distribution rights, international distribution rights.
It's nice that Bond's away from that sinking ship, just in case, because we wouldn't want to have another delay because of legal stuff and
right.
But
it's also good for Universal though too, because that's going to bring in some serious coin for them. Their big property is obviously the Jurassic Park franchise and stuff like that, and so this will be a nice second avenue to bring in some serious coin.
Absolutely, and they're a little more stable.
Good for them. I mean, they had that. Yeah, they had that whole, dark universe debacle, but
but they didn't capsize the whole like brand. It was just sort of
not
they
at
made
all.
a dumb decision as a studio, but that happens everywhere.
For sure.
I'm just like, it's nice to see that it's found some stable ground. It's found some people who are more than likely going to stay afloat. Like, Universal's been around forever. I don't think it's going anywhere.
I mean, they're one of the original studios that are still operating.
And then also we might get a James Bond theme park ride at Universal Studios. So
that's what you're excited for.
That's pretty exciting. I'd be definitely okay with that. You can go from the Jurassic Park World, World one to the
right. It should be noted that this is only international distribution rights, though.
Yeah,
but domestically, they went with Annapurna, which I think we were both talking was the perfect like we were talking a while ago, but the perfect studio for them with all of the choices they've been making as a studio, and how a studio like Annapurna is not going to really interfere. They're just going to put out the film and give you the money needed to produce it, I guess you could say. I think that's just like a match made in heaven. Personally, I'm happy they didn't go with Amazon or Apple or any of like the up and coming internet company studios or something like that. They went with
something more traditional, which is definitely in line with Bond's sort of ethos. And also, who produces the Mission Impossible films?
That's Paramount.
That's Paramount. Okay.
Yeah.
I was for a second there. I was like, wait, are they in the same? But then not. That's okay.
That would be hysterical.
That'd be really funny.
If that was the case, that that Universal has both Mission Impossible and
just corner
Bond.
the spy market. Then they'll make a spy universe instead of the dark universe.
Oh God, that would be horrible.
But I think this is great news. This is really cool because again, going back to the Sony leaks, which I read a little bit of those. I felt a little bad reading them because obviously they were obtained illegally, but some of them, I mean, they came to surface and I wasn't going to not read them. And some of the absolutely ridiculous things going on behind Spectre, I know some people are lukewarm on that film, but the fact that it's not a complete disaster is a testament to Sam Mendes as a director, because the studio notes that they were giving him were ridiculous. There was some really, really dumb stuff. I saw like different drafts of the script, and they had different things going on with like originally they were going to play a game with conch shells or something.
God!
Instead of the interrogation scene, it was going to be like a game, like a casino game, but like Blofeld wanted to beat him or something because of something. It was really dumb. And
get it. Sony's creative team sucks, man.
It was really bad. Yeah,
they just don't have any clue on what works and what isn't bad.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really glad it's like as far away from them as possible.
Yeah, seriously.
And for financial reasons, for creative reasons, for just every reason possible. So Universal, they could end up being just as bad, but I don't see them being worse than Sony.
Yeah. I mean, I really don't see it. You really haven't heard too many negative things about Universal as a distribution studio.
Exactly. And that's the thing, they're distributing as well, so it's not like they have a giant, and it's only international, so they're not like they have like too much of a thumb in the pie. But yeah, that's great. The only thing that concerns me is that Danny Boyle will be juggling productions.
That was the next thing I wanted to ask, because we touched on that when the rumors first started to arise that Danny Boyle was 100% the front runner, and he was definitely more than likely going to tackle the project, because we talked about the fact that he was going to be juggling these two projects. So now he 100% is going to be juggling those two projects, and they're two very different projects. So the question I want to pose to you is, do you think it's going to affect the production at all, or do you have like faith and confidence in him and his abilities?
I have faith and confidence in his abilities. I kind of wish it was the reverse order, though. I kind of wish he got the massive Bond 25 effort out first and then sort of recuperated by doing a smaller film. Rather than doing a smaller film and then jumping straight into a bigger film. It's like you've just... Mainly, it's selfish. Mainly, I just don't give a fuck about this
no, I really don't either. I mean, until I see a trailer or anything. But the fact that it's a musical, too, it's like such a different genre. Whereas, like, when he was tackling trance in the opening ceremonies, you could kind of... paint like a parallel between the two of them, because Trance was definitely like an action thriller, and like Bond and which inspired the opening ceremony.
Yeah. Which, and that's the thing, because like they're saying it's a smaller scale original musical, but it's still a musical. And musicals are intensive sort of productions, just because there's choreography and music that you've got to deal with in camera, and so.
But it could be interesting though, because if I'm not mistaken, I think the musical is centered around the Beatles in that time period. So maybe he'll be able to draw influence from that time period. And be like, oh, hey, Bond during this time period, maybe something can kind of work for this movie. I don't know. It's just a thought I had. The
process is weird like that, so you never know. But I just wish that he wasn't. I don't want him to be exhausted doing Bond 25, because you can tell when the director is exhausted, and
I want this Spectre.
And I want this film to feel alive and energetic and like just balls to the wall, like really, really exciting. And I'm worried that even if he's doing a smaller film before, it's going to take a toll. But I still have faith in him. He's a great director, and he's done this before, so obviously he's comfortable with it.
I mean, he knows what is going to be expected of him, and he knows the task it's going to be to switch between projects,
and he knows
switch
what
between
he's capable
two
of.
vastly different projects. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He knows what he's capable of. So obviously, if he feels confident that he can do this, then I have confidence in him, and obviously Eon and all the producers have confidence in him. So it's a good sign all around. So to kind of wrap this up, I think that this is great news. We knew it was coming. They're going to start shooting in December, which is exciting. That means we're going to get pictures and set photos and all that good stuff that we can talk about on the show late this year and early into next year. So this is just all around great news. They've been really hyping up this script, so I can't wait to see what's in store for us. So moving on to the next topic, which is not really moving away from where we're at. Most of the news really just has to deal with Bond 25 and Danny Boyle. But this is just kind of like an interesting little tidbit that surfaced. So Danny Boyle actually almost passed on Bond 25. Now, even though the director has been confirmed now, we just read you that whole thing. He was surprisingly hesitant when the project came his way, stating recently at his masterclass at the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, "I like watching big films, but I don't think I'm necessarily good at making them." Then I thought, no, you shouldn't think like that. And which is just, I mean, come on, you're offered Bond, you don't turn that down. But anyways, Bond 25 will interestingly enough mark the director's first real attempt at a blockbuster film. While he may have had initial reservations, he soon realized he needed to set aside that mindset, and after hashing out the details regarding his idea for Bond 25 with longtime collaborator John Hodge, that's when he finally decided to accept the position, saying the following: "We have this idea about what we want to do with Bond, and I feel we should have a go because of this idea. So we are trying to stay true to our principles." It should also be noted that Boyle was also driven by his desire to tackle the unknown, quote unquote, and not get into a pattern of repeating himself. Bond will ultimately allow the train-spotting director to venture into new territory, which is something I guess he thrives in. So, Brody, what are your thoughts on these comments?
I have a lot of thoughts on these comments, actually. Like surprisingly, why am I on this podcast?
Well, it's good. This is what we want to hear your insight.
But it's interesting because I get the hesitation. I get some people are hesitant because he isn't an action director, and we kind of like there has been a sort of this focus on more auteurs lately in the franchise, especially like after Sam Mendes sort of did what he did.
Yeah,
with
that was really the first real, they got Sam Mendes. Now we only have to get Academy Award nominated directors.
Right. Yeah, but even going for Mark Forster was more like going towards that sort of auteur crowd, not necessarily.
Was it?
I mean, he's not as acclaimed as Sam Mendes, but he's an indie director. He's a smaller sort of.
For sure. I
mean, the films he makes he's more like sort of vision driven rather than sort of being big tentpole things. And so like I get that they were going for that. But there is always this hesitation because like you look at Mark Forster, he obviously was not an action director because he didn't know how to direct action. And Sam Mendes, surprisingly, at least with Skyfall, did a really good job. Like I think the action in Skyfall is energetic and well shot. And
well, I mean, you got to take into account Sam Mendes also did Road to Perdition, which had some shootouts in it, you know.
Right, but I mean, like nothing to the scale of like that opening scene with on the train. Like that is one of the most energetic action scenes of that year.
Well, and it goes back to the fact that it's not necessarily the director; it's who the director surrounds himself with. So if he has a great stunt team and a choreography team behind him, they're gonna craft some awesome stuff.
But I feel like the action was a little lacking in Spectre.
Except for that opening, though, dude.
Except for that opening, exactly. The opening's fantastic.
Holy shit. Nothing else in the movie matches up to that opening. That one shot, I mean, it's genius.
Yeah, and there's a lot of the stunt work with the helicopter, but even some of the even some of the stuff with the helicopter, the way he shot it was a little annoying. Like, I feel like whereas in Skyfall, he sort of knew exactly how to shoot all the stunts. In Spectre, when the helicopter does its loop-de-loop, that should have honestly been a wide shot where you saw, and you should have been able to see the ground a little bit, just so that when it does the flip, it doesn't look like it's just rotating the camera. You know what I mean? And
yeah, it definitely, like when you're watching that and it goes to inside the helicopter, they definitely like built some sort of mechanism to like spin him around, or they put the camera on like some sort of rotating device,
which is totally fine. It's just like they actually did do they actually did make the helicopter sort of do like a barrel roll, and it's like you can sort of see that in camera. Well, not sort of. You do see it in camera, but the way it was shot, it's like it's not as breathtaking as it probably should have been. It should have been like, holy shit, they just did a barrel roll in a, like, not even a barrel roll, like a loop-de-loop in a helicopter. That should blow your mind.
Well, and that's this is slightly off topic, because that's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to Mission Impossible Fallout, is for that helicopter stunt scene, because that's it looks like they've choreographed that the right way. And with Tom Cruise, exactly. I mean, obviously they're gonna go all out and they're gonna do it the right way. That was a little aside, but still kind of related.
Actually does tie into what I was going with this, and this sort of because this is where I was going with this, and we were talking about this last night. But basically, well, not even last night. We were talking about this before we started shooting today.
Yeah, we were talking about
but there is an argument to be made, like that maybe the Bond films shouldn't be going for big auteur directors. Maybe they should be going for more like sort of workman, like journeyman type, like action directors, like a Christopher McQuarrie, not necessarily him, but like someone like John Glenn, who has basically gone up through the ranks, worked in the industry his whole life, knows the ins and outs of like choreographing an action sequence, that's done second unit like sort of work, and. So when they because that's why I feel like all the stunts in those 80s Bond movies are so great, like that opening scene in The Living Daylights. The reason that action scene was so exciting opening, is because John Glenn knows how to shoot a chase scene, because he shot chase scenes his entire career. And so while I'm still excited to see what Danny Boyle will do, I'm really I'm really hoping he knows how to sort of bring the goods when it comes to the action scene, because we haven't really seen him do anything like that before, and I hope he doesn't get like scared and go, well, I'm not going to do anything that like, you know, that ostentatious, because
but if you go back to the fact that, you know, he wants to venture out into new territory and take risks, I think that ultimately means we're going to see some pretty audacious things here.
Hopefully, and I just because now Bond has to compete with something like Mission Impossible, whereas like a couple of years ago there was nothing else doing the sort of stuff that Bond did. Now it has to actually compete.
Well, and now you've also got John Wick, which is having incredible fight choreography, which brings me to the next point I want to make, which is when they eventually cast the new actor and they do new stuff, I want to see Christopher Nolan do a Bond film, because I think he's just made for that. But I would not be opposed to seeing either David Leitch or Chad Stahelski step in and do a Bond film, because I think they've proven that they can make movies, and especially when it comes to action, there's no one like them in the business. So I'd be interested to see what they do with the Bond film, or if they're not going to direct it, have them choreograph the action, because then you'll definitely get some memorable stuff.
Yeah, but that's like more the hand-to-hand stuff, and that's the reason I would hesitate hesitate to compare Bond to something like John Wick, because I feel like they've always been like really intense. 'Cause even like the Bourne films had pretty good choreography, but there's nothing to that grand spectacle scale. Like, you know what I mean? Like Bond was sort of
okay. Did you see Atomic Blonde?
Atomic Blonde, yeah, I did see Atomic Blonde.
Okay,
I don't know if anything...
that sequence though, the one-shot sequence, I mean, that's pretty spectacular.
It was just hand-to-hand fisticuffs, though. You know what I'm talking
but that
about?
Could
like,
be
a
interesting.
Big stunt. I'm talking about like in Mission Impossible when he jumps out the window in Dubai, or how that sort of thing, like the big showstopper set piece.
Right. I think those directors have been around the business for so long. They've been stunt choreographers for so long that I think they'd definitely be able to tackle that big stunt. And if anything, it would be a challenge for them. And seeing how they overcome that challenge would be interesting.
And I think
that's a ways away though.
Right. And my only hope is that the reason I was concerned, the reason I brought it up as a concern with Danny Boyle is that we just don't know what exactly he has planned for the action stuff, because we haven't seen him do this kind of scale before. I still have a lot of hope that he's going to bring the goods, but that is something to sort of like that has been on my mind at least the last couple of days since this announcement, where it's just like I'm thinking about like I really don't want Bond to sort of fall into disregard while something like Mission Impossible takes its stunt trophy from it, because I mean anything they can do better.
Yeah.
And like I'm a little protective, so it's like as much as I really want to see great stunts, I want to see Bond doing great stunts.
Well, you know how we solve this? You know how we solve this problem?
How do we solve this problem?
We cast Tom Cruise as James Bond, and then we'll only get epic stunts.
Oh my god, that's
horrible idea. Absolutely horrible idea. But nonetheless.
Good
Or
Lord.
you know what you do? You just hire, because I guarantee you that I could just see him doing this. You hire Tom Cruise as like one of your co-stunt coordinators. I
don't know why he's not a stuntman to begin with. Yeah.
Well, because he's an actor first and foremost, and he can just wear multiple hats because he's Tom Cruise, But
I feel like he's such an adrenaline junkie. I could just see him being like, you know
he
what?
is.
I'm just going to do this just because. He's literally become Ethan Hunt. Remember in Mission Impossible 2 when like they transformed Ethan Hunt into like an adrenaline junkie for some reason?
Yeah.
He has
become that.
He's become that. He's become Mission Impossible 2 Ethan Hunt, which is bizarre.
It is interesting to note there was like that sequence in the Fallout trailer. This is a little off topic, but kind of not. Isn't there like the sequence in the Fallout trailer that's like straight up Moonraker? You were talking about it the other day.
They straight up do the skydiving like stunt from the opening of Moonraker, where he's like, I don't know if they're without parachutes. Or at least I'm
going to assume that they are, because it's
in Moonraker they had parachutes, like the stunt guys had parachutes. It was just like they were hidden underneath their clothes, but it was to give the illusion that they were skydiving without parachutes. And I'm wondering if they're doing something similar, because I saw someone in like in a Halo suit and he was jumping, and someone like tackled him around the legs, and I was like, holy shit, they're doing like straight up the Moonraker bit.
Yeah. See, now Mission Impossible is borrowing from the old Bond films. Maybe Bond needs to go back and borrow from its past,
which is
but
what
update
I'm
it a
saying.
little bit.
They should go back to those big show-stopping set pieces, and I'm hoping that Danny Boyle, because I love the drama, and I love I feel like the way Bond can sort of surpass, can reestablish itself as being like the sort of the king, is that you can have like that Skyfall-esque like sort of drama and pedigree, while at the same time, like in terms of like cinematography and script writing and all that sort of stuff and acting, but then at the same time also have like these massive stunts. And I think that's why Skyfall sort of resonated with so many people, because it had these incredible stunts. Even though it was a smaller scale film, it still had these really great like set pieces. Like the train, even the train crash was like a really cool little bit. And I don't know, I just feel like that was the one thing that, like, as someone who liked Spectre, that was the one thing that was sort of missing for me from Spectre, is that none of the action felt immediate or like jaw-dropping. None of the stunts felt like
that big snow plane stunt was just pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, and so I'm hoping that I'm Danny Boyle. I'm worried that Danny Boyle won't do something like that just because of his past, but I'm hoping that he's aware that this is what it takes to do a Bond film, and he's ready for the challenge, because he was going to be surrounding himself with people who are, I think Vic Armstrong's coming back. He's surrounding himself with like veterans of the series. So I'm not concerned that there won't be people on set who know how to do stunts. I'm just hoping he has like because even someone like Sam Mendes, who did well in Skyfall, made a lot of missteps in Spectre because it wasn't his second nature to do these kinds of films in the same way that it was for people like John Glenn or Martin Campbell. Fingers crossed, but that is like, I feel like we've sort of lost the thread a little bit, but that is one thing that I was like a little concerned about, that I'm hoping he's up for the challenge.
No, sure. Well, and I mean, as long as there's no CGI Komodo dragons, I think we'll be all good.
Hopefully there's no CGI skydiving like in Quantum of Solace.
Oh dear. Quantum of Solace. Let's get away from that movie and move on to our final topic of Tomorrow Never Lies, our new segment. And it's a birthday. We have the birthday. The birthday, Ian Fleming's birthday, was on May 28th, and so we want to wish the deceased man a happy
that's my
birthday.
mom's birthday.
Well, there you go. I guess that makes sense as to why you're a Bond fan now.
Yeah, that's it.
But question for Brody, because he is the novel auteur on this show. Ooh. What is your favorite Fleming novel, and what is the best Fleming novel?
Oh, that's hard. I mean, my favorite is Moonraker.
Right, 100%. You said that on the podcast.
I've said that before, and yeah, it is just unbelievably readable. Just great characters, great that perfect balance of like Bond being depressed and kind of like sort of a live wire, but at the same time being kind of more jovial and more, I don't know, just having a fun adventure without sort of being weighed down with like, oh shit, like I was betrayed by Vesper and all this sort of crap.
Yeah.
And his best novel, that's hard. I mean, I would say his, I mean, like his writing is generally really good across the board. But I would say in terms of like thematic complexity and in terms of sort of writing a character with depth and layers, it's got to be between Casino Royale or On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is a surprise to no one. But I just think in terms of like the stuff he tackled in those books, while also providing a really fun sort of pulpy adventure, is really, really impressive. I'm going to give it to Her Majesty's just because it came at the end of a series almost. And he was, and I really love the stuff he was doing with Blofeld and like sort of giving Bond an arch nemesis and that sort of thing. I'm going to go with Majesty's. I think not only is there's a reason it made a great movie, and there's a reason they didn't change too much. It's because it's a really fantastic book, and it's a really well-written book where, like, a fun fact about the book, if anyone didn't know, apparently George Lazenby read the final, like, pages of the book to make himself cry for the scene at the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Like, apparently he was moved to tears by the book, and so he did that on set, which is really cool. And that's a testament to how well written the book is. But yeah.
And who said George Lazenby wasn't a great actor?
He's I think George Lazenby said he wasn't a great actor.
Yeah, well, okay, fair enough. Well, anyways, there you go. You've got some light summer reading to do.
Yeah, exactly. Some light summer reading about the time that James Bond's entire world just shattered.
Yep, exactly. And if you want a more adventurous novel, go with Moonraker. If you haven't read any of the novels. So that's going to do it for Tomorrow Never Lies. If you have any comments regarding any of the topics we discussed, be sure to leave it in the comment section of wherever you are watching. And moving on to Q Branch, which is going to mean that I hand over the torch to Brody. We're sticking to books, though. Books are a huge thing going on right here. Brody, what do we got? What do you got in store for us for Q Branch? Anthony Horowitz and his new novel, right?
Yes, we do. So Forever and a Day, which is, I guess, out in the UK right now, and will be out here.
Yeah, what the fuck? We have to wait like
November.
Just
it's
unbelievable.
a really long wait too. Yeah.
Well, although I did read that you could import it. You could get a UK version imported into the US, so that might be what we do. But I don't know if I want to do that because I prefer the cover for the US version over the UK version.
It's a very cool cover. Yeah, it's like the mainly like the typeface for the actual the actual logo that looks ridiculous, like shattered glass. But so in an Entertainment Weekly exclusive, Anthony Horowitz revealed the U.S. cover for his highly anticipated 007 novel, Forever and a Day. And so that we just talked about this a little bit, but it's coming out later this year in the U.S. And it is Horowitz's second novel. His first was Trigger Mortis, which, if you haven't read that, it's really cool. It has some like reincorporated elements from some of Fleming's temp scripts that he wrote. Definitely go check that out if you haven't. We've talked a bit about it in the podcast before, but So essentially, the new novel will be a prequel to Casino Royale that takes place about 2 or 3 months before the first novel. And about this, Horowitz has to say, it's really an exploration of what turns Bond into the hard-edged, quite cold-blooded assassin that we sort of know him from as in the books. What are the forces that mold him is basically the question he wants to ask with this book, which is a little curious considering we kind of know what that is.
Yeah,
thanks to Casino Royale.
Right.
But so anyway, as expected in a Bond adventure, a beautiful woman comes into play, and this time an older, more experienced person by the name of Madame Sixten. Or 16, I don't know how I was meant to say.
I'm going to assume it's 16, but it's just spelled really, really weird because it just would make sense that it's a kind of weird last name. I don't know.
Who plays a key role in expanding the young Bond's horizons.
So basically, she teaches him sexual acts that he did not know existed.
This book is almost a love story, teases Horowitz. At heart, there's a big element of romance in it, but of course, there's also a thriller and a character study. When coming up with the storyline for Forever, Horowitz stated that he relished in coming up with a fresh action sequence for Bond. There's one in particular in a factory in the south of France, which I think is probably the most violent chapter ever written in a Bond novel. Readers will be very surprised by what happens in it. So that's exciting. That's something to look forward to. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Griffin? What are you thinking?
Cool. This sounds interesting, but I also think it's a case of like Solo syndrome, which we were kind of talking about beforehand, where it's like the character becomes who he is in Casino Royale. Like that is, for all intents and purposes, the origin story of James Bond. So the fact that there is this event that takes place like only 2 to 3 months beforehand, it just kind of begs the question, like why? Like, why is this a necessary story? We already have the backstory in Casino Royale. And even, Horowitz in this interview, which if you want to read the interview, it's pretty good. It's in Entertainment Weekly. He even says in the interview, like, pieces were laid that alluded to, like, a past that he had in Casino Royale. So this just seems even more unnecessary with that in mind. And also this whole thing about Madame 16, whatever the fuck her name is, playing a key role in the movie being like a love story. It's just like 3 months after the events of this book, we're going to have Casino Royale, and we're going to have Vesper, who is the love of his life, who completely transforms his world. Why do we need this really impactful love interest and making this book like a borderline love story? It just it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
it's very, very weird
aspect of the character to sort of focus on, considering there's so many other elements you could focus on that weren't in Casino Royale.
Yeah,
but why go back to the same well? Yeah,
right. It just seems like a rehash of Casino Royale, only not as deep. You know what I'm saying? It's just like,
I mean, it can't be that deep of a cut because he never talks about it again. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So, that's the only issue I have with it. Like, I was never really, and I think we talked about this on like last episode or the episode before, but I wasn't really excited about the fact that we're getting a Casino Royale prequel. Much in the same way I wasn't excited that we were getting a Han Solo prequel, because everything you need to know about the character is in that first encounter, and it serves to set up the rest of his journeys, in later books or movies or whatever.
Yeah. I see. I don't. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I'll just close it out with this. The only thing that I am interested in seeing are the the action sequences that he's alluding to, some of the most violent ones ever written, that's intriguing. So, and it makes sense for Bond at that point in time. He's kind of like a loose cannon. He's off the cuff. And he's just going to be really brutal, which we already saw in Casino Royale. So it's like kind of redundant, but maybe he'll be even more unrefined in this prequel novel. Who knows? But that's really the only thing that gets me super excited, aside from the fact that like Anthony Horowitz is writing it. So
yeah, and it does sound like they're taking a lot of elements from like, because in the Casino Royale movie, they sort of play up the whole like young agent thing. Which in the novel there isn't a ton of that. There's a little bit like where he's obviously not like, he hasn't been a 00 for forever, but they sort of recount them at a later point just to sort of give him some backstory. It's not really like this is his first mission or anything like that. So it sounds like he's taking a couple of those elements from the movie and sort of embellishing on them in the literary universe, which is
right.
cool.
So it'll the book, as opposed to like Casino Royale, the movie, where it actually shows him achieve 00 status. This book will tell a different story, most likely, of him achieving his 00 status and that license to kill is what I assume.
Yeah,
they're probably going
to. They're probably going to like. I don't think we'll see him. I think they alluded to the fact that he gets like sort of rushed into the 00 program because the original 007 dies, or the previous 007 dies,
right?
And so he gets like sort of thrown into this thing, and so we're going to see a lot of that sort of story going on, where it's like a fresh-faced Bond, which is an interesting story, which I think last episode I said I would be keen to see.
Right. You mentioned the 007 dying thing. There was another article, or he did an interview with MI6. The Bond website, not like the actual government agency. What was it about? Because I think you read it. I didn't necessarily look into it, but basically was, he said like 007 is dead, and we're like, oh, Bond is dead? What? But it's like, no, not that James. The
previous
the old,
007.
The previous 007, yeah.
Which makes sense. The rank is sort of transferable.
Yeah.
And so, that's pretty much what I think the book's going to center on. At least that's going to be one of the main sort of premises of the book, which again that's an idea I like. But this whole madam, that's the one thing I don't mind.
I don't like that. Yeah,
me neither. Yeah, because it's like I like the idea of prequel stories. I don't hate that as a premise. Like, I think I was a little skeptical of Solo at first, but if you can tell a story that doesn't rehash the story of the you know what I mean? Like if they had made a story that sort of rehashes A New Hope's arc, which to some extent they do, but then that's a big turnoff for me. And the same with Bond. It's sort of like if they do the exact same story as Casino Royale, where he like learns to love and then has his heart broken, that sort of thing, I don't need to see that story twice, back to back.
Absolutely not.
I was down to see more of like sort of young Bond, not even young, like several months younger Bond, sort of figuring out his new job. Yeah. But then you introduce this love element. And it's like I don't need to see that. I don't need to see that at all because I've already seen it. And especially like I'm getting like, I don't know if you're familiar with any of the 50 Shades of Grey books.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
But in those books, like I haven't read them, but I know what happens in some of them.
Right, it's like, yeah.
Well, I think it's like the second one, Christian Grey has a
mature lover that's like
he had a mature he had a mature lover back in the day that like it's like every woman wants Christian Grey except for this one woman who he wants because like she's like the older mistress who taught him all his BDSM stuff and all that crap. Yeah. And that's what this sounds like. And that's like, that's not a comparison I want to make.
I don't think we'll have to worry about
also,
that.
The whole madam thing, I'm pretty, is she meant to be like the madam of like a you know,
a whorehouse?
Like a whorehouse? Yeah. Is that what she's, which is like, oh God, this is like,
I have no idea.
That sounds really pathetic. Like,
I will be very curious to read this. I think actually what I'm going to end up doing is just having the book imported so that we can discuss it, to be honest with you, because I'm very curious as to how good it is.
So that I'm skeptical of that. I'm not skeptical that the book will be good because I like Trigger Mortis. I like Anthony Horowitz as a writer, but this idea sounds a little weird, and a little weird, especially since like if Bond's going to be like fawning over this woman, And then he goes to Casino Royale and he fawns over Vesper, and it's just like, Jesus Christ.
It just kind of doesn't do anything for the character. It just makes...
It just treads water, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of just puts his insecurities at the forefront, and that's not necessarily something that I want out of James Bond. I mean, there's obviously some more... I don't even mind the insecurities part. It's more.
Well, I just don't like.
It's just a rehash of the same thing.
The same story. Yeah, it's like Vesper was his vulnerable moment, and we don't need to see a back-to-back two vulnerable moments involving two women. You know, it's like if you're gonna have him have a vulnerable moment, make it about something completely different. Make it about having to kill or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like make it about something a little more. Unexplored, because if you're gonna explore this sort of like how he becomes the hard-edged killer, there's plenty of things that can do that rather than just being scorned by a lover or being unrequited in your love. Like there's more than just that could make Bond cold.
Yeah, I agree.
And we've already seen the love thing sort of turn him cold to like relationships and all that. So. Yeah. Why not show him being not wanting to be a dispassionate killer? Because that's a big part of the Fleming novels is that Bond hates killing in cold blood. Bond is a merciless assassin, but he hates his job. He doesn't like the fact that he kills people, and he doesn't like doing it when it's not justified. So why don't you explore the origins of that? Make him grapple with that a bit, and sort of establish this sort of long running, because that's something that's referenced in all the books. So. Establish that. Don't establish fucking Madam 16 and Bordello. Like, I don't need to see that.
Yeah,
but,
no,
again,
I agree.
I'm prejudging without having read the book. It could be something completely different. Maybe he has to murder Madam 16, and that's what he gets all like sort of wishy-washy about. We don't know.
Right. Well, I think we'll find out soon because I already have it pulled up on Amazon, and I'm gonna order it. I'm gonna get it imported.
Oh yeah.
There we go. And you should do the same, Brody, so that we can have a great, lively discussion about it.
I actually might do that. Yeah. Is it a hardcover or a paperback?
They have both.
Excellent. Good. Because I don't want the hardcover.
Oh, really? You're not a fan of the hardcover?
I can't read them. Yeah. I think that they're the most obnoxious things to hold.
I like them when they're put on a shelf, but actually holding them, they're no.
I totally agree. Yeah, they should have they should do hard cases for paperback books, so you can take them out of the hard case.
Yeah,
best of
cool
both
stuff.
worlds.
Well, anyways, the show continues, not talking about books, though. We don't really have anything for Brother from Langley. That's really only, like a once-in-the-wild kind of segment.
We talked a bit about Fallout earlier, too.
Yeah, so that we kind of incorporated that into other stuff. So let's just move on to the big thing that we're excited about, Shaken But Heard, our discussion segment. We got a really juicy one here, and it kind of stemmed from a conversation we were having last night, as most of these segments do. We were essentially discussing the similarities between the Daniel Craig era and the Sean Connery era of Bond, and how the films, weirdly enough, kind of parallel each other and what they're trying to do. So I don't know, Brody, if you want to kind of start this off here.
Oh, yeah. So basically what we were talking about, yeah. So like obviously there are aesthetic parallels between the Connery films and the Craig films, because Craig's sort of going back to that 60s well, which is like very in vogue right now. It's like they're borrowing things like the more sort of Ken Adams looking sets and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think even on a more like sort of fundamental level, and I don't think this is intentional, at least I hope it's not intentional, because it's kind of just like, it'd be a weird thing to plan. But
yeah, very weird. Yeah.
All of Craig's films are sort of like, they sort of have an analog in the Connery films, like even in the same order. So basically Dr. No and Casino Royale are kind of similar in not narratively, obviously, but in like the way they sort of approach the material. There's sort of a more of a grounded, I don't know, it's just very straightforward approach to the material.
Well, and on just like a surface level, it's the origin story of the character.
Right, yeah, it's the starting of this like sort of
it's the starting point. It kind of like it hits the ground running with like great action, a grounded set piece, and it's like not,
and the
it's
villain,
like the character's
is
still
kind of like eccentric but not like over the top crazy, sort of, You've got a
Right.
guy who's a cog in the machine of this organization that you sort of hear about, but that's
Yeah,
about all
yeah.
you sort of know. Yeah, and then you get to Quantum of Solace or For Russia with Love,
Which,
and-
let's just disclose this. I mean, not disclose it, but just make this very clear. From Russia with Love is one of the best Bond films, and Quantum of Solace is one of the worst Bond films.
I don't know if it's one of the worst. I think it's thoroughly average. I think it's an average Bond film.
Right,
but
right.
It's,
But
yeah, no.
we should just
this
note
is
that
not
From Russia with Love is like higher in quality.
Oh yeah, this isn't a quality because I think Casino Royale is better than Dr. No.
Well, I agree with you, but I mean, at least you can kind of compare those, and people won't be like, "Oh, okay, that's like fucking out there."
So, but yeah, no, this isn't a quality comparison.
No, it's more of just like a substance and like
yeah, like sort of like just sort of approach wise, because then you get to Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and From Russia with Love, and they're both kind of sequels. From Russia with Love less so, but it does deal with the death of Dr. No very directly, considering the rest of the series sort of becomes less and less serialized.
Yeah.
But there's also like a darker tone from the previous film, a more like sort of serious approach to the material. There's a real
it's even
world
more,
sort of,
real world,
Yeah.
even more grounded than the previous one.
Yeah, there's like a
dealing
real
with
world
like
approach.
dealing with like the politics and the happenings around the world at the point in
exactly.
time that movie was released.
Yeah, and so so that's pretty much like the parallels there. There's like a, and then again you're sort of dealing with cogs in the machine of this larger organization again, and then you jump to Goldfinger and Skyfall, which are completely separate from that overarching story that you've had going for the last two films.
But also very clear. Well, sorry, those two are probably, out of any of the comparisons we're making, are probably very clearly related. In fact,
I think people have made this connection before. Like
Skyfall is
are
very much inspired by Goldfinger, and like its isolated story, and it's like not necessarily acknowledging the events of the past and stuff like that.
And there's like an over the top eccentric villain.
Yeah, the villain takes the spotlight for sure.
Also, like weirdly enough, like very domestic settings. Like Goldfinger takes place mostly in like Kentucky, and Skyfall takes place mostly in like continental England.
Yeah.
Or like Ireland. I don't know what you call it when it's an island, but
no,
but
I think it was
essentially-
Scotland, right?
Well, yeah, they're on. Not Ireland. I'm saying like it's an island, so I don't know if you can call it continental.
Oh, sorry, your accent got in the way.
Is that what it is? But yeah, no, they're definitely in Scotland. But yeah, there's like a more localized domestic sort of thing. Yeah, there's just a lot of that, like a lot of parallels going on there.
Yeah.
And then you get to Spectre and Thunderball, which is sort of like riding off the coattails of this huge success. Yeah. They just go, okay, we're going to make the biggest fucking movie ever. So they make something huge. It's a little bloated and unwieldy in places.
Yeah.
And it almost takes the material more seriously than the previous film, to the detriment of the film in some places. Like Spectre takes itself very seriously, in the same way that sort of Thunderball takes its plot more seriously than I guess Thunderball did, than Goldfinger did. Sorry. There's like an emphasis to sort of go to more exotic locales this time and sort of show it off. And
they're basically showing off the budget they have. It's the blockbuster out of the four. I think I was talking about this because I just watched Thunderball, and I definitely saw the comparisons with Spectre, even though I think Thunderball is a much better film. But it's just like, they're just throwing their budget out there. They're like, look at all these underwater stunts we can do, and look at this action set piece, and like this weirdly iconic villain who's only iconic for a look.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It's just like, because
as much as I like Christoph Waltz in the role, he was, for a lot of people, very sort of underdone. In the same way that I feel like Largo is very one note. And yeah, no, there's just a lot of really interesting stuff.
I mean, they both deal with Spectre directly. I mean, this is really the first. I mean, like, he's up until Thunderball, Bond had run-ins with Spectre in the past. I mean, from his first encounter with Dr. No, but it was more so Bond versus Dr. No trying to save the world or something like that. And then in From Russia with Love, it's less so that he's dealing with Spectre and more so with like.
Well, he's being manipulated by Spectre. In that one,
right.
So,
I mean, he's being but he doesn't necessarily know it. I think, right? I mean, he's like...
Yeah, he thinks that he's pulling a con on the Russians,
Exactly.
which is part of their plan, yeah.
Which leads to the more, like, Cold War feeling of it. And then obviously Goldfinger not really dealing with Spectre. But in Thunderball, it is really the first time he's directly dealing with it. Because, Blofeld sends the British government those, ransom tapes saying, like, if you don't pay this sum of money, we're going to set off nukes or whatever.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is there's like a more direct, like it feels more like a Spectre operation rather than someone that Spectre is just sort of funding. And
that's that's kind of similar. It's kind of a similar way to what Spectre is doing. Like the main villain of Spectre is like the organization of Spectre, and it's kind of embodied by Blofeld in that movie.
But
whereas
even
like in Thunderball,
C is kind of like a Largo kind, like a one-note henchman type who works.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just in Spectre, he's kind of the head of the organization, and in Thunderball, Largo is very much. I mean, he's the number 2 guy, and he's kind of the embodiment of the organization.
Yeah. No. Exactly. And then it's just like, even in terms of like just sort of, I don't know, returning to the organization after that hiatus.
Yeah,
feels and then not only returning to the organization, but sort of trying to tie it back into the previous films in a way. Yeah, like it's less like sort of overt in Thunderball, but there is like sort of this. Hey, remember Spectre from these previous films? We're gonna do that again. And obviously in Spectre there is a literal tying in all of the different villains to this organization. So yeah, I just think there's a lot of parallels, which is weird. Because I don't think that was intentional. I think I wouldn't say they were. And even like just sort of that progression of going from like something more grounded to something more fantastical over 4 films, which happens with most Bond actors, but it's so. I don't know. There's something about it that's just so. Very, very odd.
Well, even like you could look at Craig's portrayal of the character and see how he directly draws from Connery. I mean, he's definitely more of the brutish force. He's not as suave as say Connery was, but I mean, there are moments when he has that that like cool sense to him, the womanizer kind of sense to him. But he's definitely more of like a physical presence than anything, which that was one of the things that Connery was well known for in his portrayal of Bond. And Craig, probably more so, is going to be remembered for his physicality in the role. And so, I mean, you could definitely see him drawing from Connery in that regard.
I mean, Ian Fleming at first hated Sean Connery because he thought he was too much of a brute to play Bond. So
there you go. Yeah. I can only imagine what he would think of Daniel Craig.
Oh my God, yeah. He might like him a bit more just because he's actually English, and he did. I think that Sean Connery was a Scot.
True, very true.
Which he eventually came around to and incorporated Scottish heritage into Bond's lineage in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. But I don't know. It's just there's a lot of really interesting parallels, and I don't see too many people talking about it other than the aesthetic. Obviously, the aesthetic choices to sort of make, like, sort of start dressing Craig a bit more like Connery and sort of change the sets a little bit. Hopefully, they don't follow this trajectory to its logical conclusion, because that means we're going to get A Year and Live Twice and A Diamonds Are Forever, we won't get diamonds, but the means we'll get You Only Live Twice. They could jump the gun and go straight for diamonds. You never know.
We don't want that. No one wants that.
Or they can jump straight to Majesties. You never know.
That's the trajectory I hope they take, and not necessarily in like emulating that story, but in emulating the quality of film,
and the approach to the film, like doing big stunts, doing big story, doing action stakes.
And speaking of Majesties, I know this is a little off topic, but that is the perfect balance of what you were talking about, of them, having that personal story, that really compelling narrative, but pairing it with memorable action sequences that are unlike anything you've seen at that point in time.
And it's directed by Peter Hunt, who's basically just an editor. So
maybe what they need to do for the reboot, if they can't get Christopher, or I shouldn't say reboot, but for 26, if they can't get Christopher Nolan, get one of the technical guys, or one of the second unit directors who maybe understands the franchise a little bit more. Give them a shot in the spotlight, because I'm all for that. Ever since you mentioned that, John Glenn, what's the guy's name? Hunt.
Peter Hunt.
Peter Hunt. I mean, look at that. Like, just. And you could even go as far, I mean, different franchise, but David Leitch and Chad Stahelski, I mean, they were stunt coordinators up until John Wick, and then you look and you see what they did with John Wick, and it's incredible. Yeah. So I think
you said Christopher McQuarrie was a writer.
Yeah, Christopher McQuarrie, who was doing the past 2 Mission Impossible films. He was a screenwriter on The Usual Suspects. So maybe some of these guys who don't necessarily spend most of their time in the director's chair need to be given that second look to tackle properties such as this, because I think they have a lot of great ideas, and to let their voice be
too.
Exactly. I feel like they probably work better with the producers and such. And especially if they're used to a certain genre or realm, or franchise even, it might be kind of a smart idea to go with one of them.
Yeah, which is not to say that I don't love that we're getting auteurs as well.
Oh, not at all. I'm 100%. I 100% love the idea of Danny Boyle. I'm just thinking like later down the road after the Craig era, maybe have Christopher Nolan kick off 26 with a bang, and then get some smaller unknown directors like a Chad Stahelski, like a David Leitch, like a Christopher McQuarrie. Not saying Christopher McQuarrie should direct a Bond film, but like someone.
I wouldn't be opposed, but
I wouldn't be opposed either. Let's see how Fallout turns out.
Brad
but
Bird or someone like that, like someone who's done a Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah. Well, in that case,
they can finally graduate to
to James Bond. Well, in that case, let's just grab J.J. Abrams.
I do not want a J.J. Abrams.
His style is very.
He's got too much of a style. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily work for me, but. But anyways, getting back to the discussion at hand, it's just an interesting comparison to make between the two, and I think people have made the comparison before, namely in just like the acting standpoint. But I like you said, I haven't heard the trajectory of the films and the types of things the films tackle. I haven't heard that comparison made yet, so it's really interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah, no, it's just fascinating because. I think it happened. It's fascinating because it happened organically. Like I think with Pierce Brosnan, there was too much of an attempt to make him like Connery. As much as I love Pierce Brosnan,
I didn't get that at all.
Absolutely. I mean, like, absolutely. Pierce Brosnan was like as much as I love Pierce Brosnan, and I do, he's almost the engineered Bond, where it's like he is
genetically engineered.
His whole like sort of his whole stint, his whole tenure in the role was kind of designed to be, peak Bond. It's like, okay, we're gonna do like a big old, From Russia with Love story with this one. Oh, we're gonna do a big old, you know what I mean? Like we're gonna make his character do all the one-liners that Connery did. We're gonna make him do all the action that Connery did. We're gonna throw a bit more of that charm from Roger Moore in. Like it was. Yeah, that's
the thing that I think of when I think of Pierce Brosnan. Like I think he's more of like a hybrid of Moore and Connery.
Absolutely, yeah.
But he's like way more of a womanizer than Moore was for whatever reason. Like weren't you saying that Pierce Brosnan has the most sex in like the Bond films or something like that? I think like a while ago you said that.
Was I say sex, or like he has like I think he has the most sex and he also has the most kills.
Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah.
He like I think he and Roger Moore are on par for the most sex. Roger Moore just has the advantage of having more films, but but and it also was like the 70s and people were sort of I don't know,
free spirited.
Yeah. Whereas like so Pierce Brosnan was just balls to the wall. He's the American Bond. In that
he is, dude.
He's the American Bond
God.
in that he's like, machine gun toting, like just heavy. I mean, he didn't actually drink as much as the other Bonds, but which is weird.
Yeah,
he doesn't smoke either. He's like got that sort of American 90s like sort of I don't smoke or drink, but I'm gonna fucking kill everyone. And then fuck them.
he is a 90s action star in those movies. Yeah,
and I think whereas with Daniel Craig, they sort of just said we're gonna go back to the roots. We're just gonna adapt Casino Royale. and we're not going to try and force any of the Connery stuff on him. We're not going to force any of the Roger Moore stuff. We're not going to do the one-liners or anything like that.
Yeah.
We're just going to go back to basics in the same way that sort of Timothy Dalton was a back to basics. And I think he just organically evolved over each film into a similar sort of path that Sean Connery ended up, because they both sort of started in this similar space of like, let's just go to the material and
you make what you can of it. And
make
you
what
do
you can
your
of it.
thing.
And it is interesting that Bond always seems to skew in this direction.
I think it's just because of...
Like it's his true north.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very, very interesting. It makes me wonder what Timothy Dalton's Bond would have become had he done two more. You know what I mean? Like, would he have found that true north as well, or would he have stuck to the literary Bond as much as he did? Who knows? But it's really interesting, and I think it says a lot about the character and the character's appeal.
Yeah, yeah.
And the film's appeal too, I guess.
Well, and it also, speaks to how influential Sean Connery was.
Oh, absolutely,
at establishing the character and kind of really finding that true north, and people are still drawing from it. Daniel Craig still draws from it. Every actor really has drawn from his performance.
You have to, yeah. There's no way you can't. And it's like throwing even Timothy Dalton, who I think is the most literary Bond we're probably ever going to get. But at least for now, he's the closest. Even he kind of every now and then will throw in the one-liners or do something that's a little more like sort of Sean Connery-esque, just because that's expected of Bond now. That is who Bond is. So, it's interesting.
Well, very fascinating discussion. I'm curious to hear your all thoughts on the topic we discussed. Do you think that there's an odd amount of similarities between the Craig era and the Connery era? Are you seeing the comparisons that we're making? Leave all your thoughts and opinions down in the comments section below. And then also, while you're in the comments section, let us know what your favorite Craig film is and what your favorite Connery film is, because that'll be interesting, especially when it comes to Connery. I think Craig, it's kind of just either one film or another film. But anyways, guys, that is going to do it for this episode of The Words Are Not Enough. I'd like to thank Brody for joining me. Brody, where can everyone find you?
You can all find me at Brody Ceravelli on Twitter if you'd like to see me arguing about Star Wars. That's what I'm doing right now. So
yes, not even arguing about Bond, Star Wars.
Yeah, man. I mean, when the Bond movie comes out, actually, I will argue. Remember that tweet we saw? This is a complete tangent. Remember that tweet we saw?
Oh my God!
About,
Should we even bring that up? I think
it was about how Ethan Hunt was better than James Bond.
Yeah,
and it made me want to actually commit a crime.
Man, that just.
So that's no offense to the fine people. I've just gushed about the Mission Impossible stunt work. No offense to those films, but. There's not even the character isn't even remotely as interesting as Bond.
No way,
There's no character. It's just Tom Cruise running around. But yeah. So if something else like that comes up, then you'll see me arguing about Bond. But other than that, I'm going to be arguing about Star Wars for now.
He's going to be fighting the good fight.
That's it.
I was going to make a White Knight joke, but then I was like, oh crap. Now we're going to tie back into Tomorrow Never Dies again, which we seem to do on a regular basis with this show. Oh man, delicious. Oh, God damn it. I knew it.
Fantastic.
Oh my God. We just can't get away from it. And you're about to watch the movie tonight, I believe, right?
Hell yeah. I got to keep the Pierce Brosnan train running. I watched GoldenEye last night, so got to do it.
There we go. Well, and guys, if you do like this podcast, which hopefully you do if you're listening, please be sure to leave a rating and a review on iTunes or iHeartRadio, wherever you're listening to this, but specifically iTunes. It really helps out the show. It helps us get noticed. And leave your feedback, because we ultimately want to hear from you. Are we doing a good job? Do we suck? Leave all that good stuff in the ratings review section of the podcast feed on iTunes, or in the comments section, whatever you want to do. And also be sure to subscribe to the Men vs. Movies YouTube channel for more podcasts like this and other movie and television related content. And lastly, guys, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can always give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. And until next time, guys, take care.